It's the 1970s. Technology is booming. The constant threat of a deadly disease wiping out the population hangs in the air. The conditions outside are unlivable. There is little hope left in the world. The humans decide to build walled cities to avoid the harsh environment of the outside world. To have safety, shelter, community. This brings us to Walled City 99. Where are the humans? The humans have seemingly vanished with no explanation. Whether it was the poor air quality, the flesh-eating bacteria, or the rapid spreading of the pandemic. They are gone. But now there are companions who have culture, food, and dress. They display a wide variety of suspiciously human behaviors, which introduces us to some questions. How did humans adapt within this dystopian hell? Why do companions act like they are sentient? What gives these machines life? I am Moxie, and this is Heavy Speculation.
Humans were the first residents around here. It seems that they're all dead now.
Within the dead city, our little one is led to a small apartment. Within a secret room, stowed away is a sarcophagus, connected to a companion. Atop a shelf is a box carrying a drone companion, B12. Most of the writing on the box is standard, foldable for easy transportation, open platform and entirely programmable, autonomous and gesture sensing. B12 has memories to collect, which implies B12 has a past. This device makes transferring a human's consciousness into data possible. This presents the question, are companions human? Vapora loves tossing buckets with her friends, but she's clumsy. Johan meditates but does not want to be interrupted. Razenput tried downloading an aimbot and installed some malware that turned his face upside down.
Don't tell anyone, but I'm creating my own shade of pain.
May is in her deconstructivist period and is so messy.
I'm calling it garbage brown.
Billy has a leg shake and hangs out at the bar all day with Jacob, bartender, who is Employee of the Month. Pedro is angry that he was sold a faulty battery, though he greets the little one cheerfully. Funny thing is, the merchant is probably also using the same faulty battery. Marusk enjoys playing music that is found by our little one. The companions get cold. Many of them sit idly with colorful blankets. Elliot the coder shakes like a drug addict in front of his screens. At first, I kind of thought he was mimicking human behavior that he had seen. However, after acquiring the super detergent, trading the bartender for some cables, and bringing those cables to Grandma, Grandma will knit a sweater. Give the sweater to Elliot, and he offers to fix anything our little one needs. This whole trading sequence required to advance the game is very telling of the complex systems the companions rely on as a whole. Grandma is probably my favorite of all these companions. She is loved by many for the stylish sweaters she knits. She sits patiently waiting for more cables so she can continue to knit. One of the most fascinating places in the whole game, to me, is Jess's library.
There are so many books here. The Turing Test Legacy, The Ethics of Artificial Intelligence. I recognize some of these. Did I have a library?
This library feels like a repurposed apartment. Perhaps Jess felt some obligation to protect and preserve the books left in this world.
I remember nothing was quite like the smell of books and the turn of a page. It was a feeling, almost like comfort. A book was like spending time with someone.
There are 14 generic book titles, and several unique ones. Broken String Theory, Guitar Maintenance, My Uncle is Lagging, Spine Reading, My Aunt is a Robot. Might be a comedy about a pervasive issue within the companion culture. Most comedy is about real-world issues, like my bank account. While this may appear punny to us on the outside, this allows us to understand that perhaps many of these companions had issues with not being able to adapt and evolve to the conditions that they were left in by the humans. The Four-Eyed Robot. I'm interested if this could be alluding to some kind of leader or enigmatic companion with a different head that happened to have 4 eyes. Could also be a nerd companion with glasses. This companion is fun to imagine because why would a 4-eyed robot have a whole book dedicated to it? The bestseller, Void, an essay about nothing. The fact that this book is almost everywhere, and there are so many copies of it in this library, tells us that the humans and the companions alike have adopted a nihilistic outlook on life, which makes more sense in these conditions. However, the adoption of this book across the walled cities can also contribute to the lack of hope. Guide to Synthetic Wine. Synthetic wine would be the anathema to modern-day wine snobs. It is readily apparent almost everywhere that a culture of drinking took over during the pandemic within the walled city. The companions adopted this behavior, consuming oil to mimic humans. Quantum Tunneling, a boring book. Quantum tunneling is an issue in our real world, and it's one of the things limiting our technological advancement. Transistors cannot get any smaller because transistors can flip from 1 to 0 at random because of their small size. This is where quantum computing comes in, but it's expensive and cumbersome. However, it does currently exist. Perhaps this book expands on the issue that originally existed, and AI moved past. The alternative is that the society never advanced beyond this issue, which is why so many copies exist of this book. Perhaps the humans were encouraging the AI to help with the problem by writing a book that the companions would understand. On the other hand, if it was written by the companions, perhaps it is an explanation for the humans, hence the title being a cheap pun. The Great Bolt Shortage. Upon reading the cover of this book, it got me thinking about how unsustainable a city can become once things start to run out. What hope is there for a collective society when even basic bolts start to run out? There is a book referencing Gravity Falls, which has a handprint traded for the paw print and the letter D instead of a number. In the middle of the alcove of this library is presumably Jess, who may have shut off due to books toppling her. She was holding a book. This book she is holding gives us some insight as to how the companions may have evolved.
How to develop your artificial intelligence in order to be as creative as a real human, Volume 42.
So this book implies that the companions have developed their AI to act like humans, and they are even trying to further advance their AI to include creativity. This stands in direct opposition to what we learn about the scientist. In the memory about Ram N, B12 tells us that he didn't know the companions would or could evolve digestive systems and is confused by it. AI isn't exactly creative. If you've played around at all with AI and art, ChatGPT, you might have experienced this. For instance, ChatGPT is a language-based model. It cannot tell you the right answers to everything accurately, and it cannot create new work, only string together pre-existing work. AI hasn't developed to this level yet in our real world. However, in this world, it appears that companions are teaching each other to enhance their internal software. So the only one who's a real person is just the scientist? B12? The only sarcophagus in the game are the one at the scientist's own lab in Chapter 3, and later on in Chapter 9, Ant Village. It's unclear whether more than one person could use the same sarcophagus. Considering there aren't more around, it becomes difficult to determine whether it is really possible for the companions to be humans. Unless there's some kind of bunker or basement of Negocorp hiding a massive amount of these devices, I feel like it would be fair to conclude that access was limited to a select few special individuals. I don't believe that the scientists made the sarcophagus because more than one exists. It would be difficult to explain why and how the devices could have even moved to such a place. The companions do sleep, which is explained by the fact that they can have low batteries. One of the things that makes a person sentient is self-awareness. I'd say most of the companions are in fact self-aware. Then there's me much in Ant Village.
I do love the smell of fresh paint. It reminds me of, oh wait, I can't smell anything. How sad.
B12 has amnesia after scanning about who he really is. And when he remembers, he needs a few minutes, but then he can remember everything.
The various shades of death that we see companions subjected to in jail lead to questions of what the definition of death is. If the mind of a human is uploaded into a companion, then is that person still alive? What if they have the personality, but not the memories? What if the memories are subsequently deleted?
B12 was trapped in the network, presumably City Technical. It was dark, and he was alone. This suggests that amnesia is a deliberate side effect of being uploaded to the network. Hundreds of years, the scientist waited. Alone. If people can upload their consciousness, who decides if they get a body? This begs the question, are there others trapped within the network? Was it only B12? This gets even more complex with the implication of the companion in the sewers. Within the first shop in Midtown, we meet Vladdy. He is casually reading How to Be a Ninja, and the book must be a banger, presenting philosophical questions that hang on Vladdy's mind while reading.
So there's a theory that suggests we are all inside an underground bunker city. Made up things are presented to us as shadows on the walls, but those shadows are made up by someone. And in order to learn the truth, we must exit this underground city at the risk of being dazzled.
Philosophy is considered to be a deeply useful skill by humans. Plato believed that philosophy is therapy for the soul. This is where we arrive at the most famous philosophical concept, Allegory of a cave. According to Plato, this was used to compare the effects of education and the lack of it in our nature. In Book 7 of Plato's book, The Republic, there are people residing within a cave. There is no natural light in this cave. The walls are dark. The only thing that the people in the cave can see is the shadows projected by the light of a nearby torch. They assume that the shadows are real, and paying attention to the shadows will teach them much about life and the real world.
Oh, is that the outside that Momo keeps talking about?
Another picture of the outside. Get out of here with that stuff. It's all nonsense. Ah, the myth of the blue sky. Beautiful concept.
One of the residents escapes the cave and is dazzled by the sunshine. He encounters the true forms of the shadows he saw within the cave. Previously, he had been looking merely at phantoms. Now he is nearer to the true nature of being.
There are ones who know about the outside but are too resigned to do anything. There's a logo of the Outsiders. They were a group of people looking for the surface. Momo was one of them.
He goes back to the other residents to explain the outside world. They don't believe him, and eventually plot to kill him. I really like the way School of Life put it here. The cave dwellers are humans prior to philosophy. The sun is the light of reason. The alienation of the returned philosopher is what the truth tellers can expect when they take their knowledge back to the people who have not devoted themselves to thinking. This side effect is very telling. The companions may not remember ever being human. I know for a fact that companions were made as helpers to the humans, based on the ancient relic. The existence of the sarcophagus blurs the lines between companion and human.
Consider this. Tomorrow, if I replace my arm with another robotic arm. And then the next day my other arm too, and then my body, and so on, until I've replaced all my parts and upgraded my software. Will I be the same robot you are talking to now?
The Ship of Theseus is a philosophical question posed by Plutarch. He asks if a ship was made out of 1,000 planks of wood and each board was replaced over 1,000 years. Is it still the same ship? There are 6 philosophically accepted answers to this question. We will use B12 as an example for the application of understanding this question. This is based on the actual question posed by the Ship of Theseus. In Scenario 1, B12 is the scientist. The underlying assumption of Scenario 1 is that ordinary objects can survive gradual change. In Scenario 2, B12 exists and so does the scientist. But the scientist also lives in the network. Better yet, his body is still presumably sealed within the sarcophagus. Scenario 2's underlying assumption is that B12 can't be the scientist, because the scientist still exists somewhere else. Now we have 2 scientists, but which one is the real scientist? You can see how this gets extremely convoluted, right? How does that apply to human consciousness then? Is human consciousness under the definition of an ordinary object? The underlying assumption of Scenario 2 would be building off of the underlying assumption of Scenario 1. The scientist still lives in the network because B12 was just a copy of him. This would also make sense because the scientist's entire consciousness couldn't possibly fit within B12. This would explain the massive amounts of memories that are missing. Perhaps there was hope that technology would one day be able to hold an entire human consciousness. All that would remain are the necessary parts. Scenario 3, an object goes where its parts go, meaning the scientist is in fact B12. The scientists move through these forces and there is only one consciousness. This creates a problem for the second scenario if both were to exist. The first solution for this problem is that no, B12 can't be the scientist. It is not possible, denying the assumption an object goes where its parts go. The second solution is that the scientist eventually died due to change, as his consciousness was copied over and over again. Not immediately, but at some point. The third solution is that as soon as his consciousness was uploaded, he was technically dead.
What if the disk is completely wiped? If the head is completely destroyed and removed? At some point, death happened. That's exactly where may be a question for philosophers.
And a new version of the scientist was born. The destruction of each consciousness was replaced by the birth of a new one. The fourth solution is that both the scientist and B12 are both the scientist. This denies the transitivity of identity. Solution 5 is that it's no longer clear who the scientist really is. It becomes a 4-dimensional problem called a wormhole solution. This adopts a separate paradigm that looks at the object differently. This would mean that every version of the scientist throughout all time is the scientist. If you apply this problem to each companion, it becomes really unclear who they are. So, with this new paradigm in mind, my thoughts began racing. Would death happen as soon as a person tries to upload their consciousness? Or do they survive beyond that? Does death eventually happen after copying consciousness over and over again? Brains are essentially electrical signal. Can the soul really transcend a body? Is the soul real? Does the soul even matter in this process? Uploading may have seemed like the only viable option. If the pandemic was extremely deadly, as implied by the severity of the punishments on the posters, perhaps the humans would have wanted to be uploaded. This explains the human-like behaviors that the companions have. For instance, why would they have an entire cutscene for watching this argument between 2 companions? If the little one actually observes the conversation, the gestures are just so human-like. When Momo bumps into Zack while he's running into the bar, there's just this little head shake. Same with Kukim in Ant Village, when talking to the person running the restaurant. Jinma thinks that nothing makes sense if they can't dance. And Miko is actually really good at dancing. Did they learn how to do that as companions, or could they actually be human? It's these little quirks in how they move and act that cause me to question if the companions were once human. What if parts of themselves were lost through the transfer process? Are they still the same person? If they are human, each of the companions live in sheer ignorance, carrying out old habits day to day. I'd like to believe that the human race is extremely stubborn. I'd wager there's a blend of both human and companion, almost creating a new unified hybrid race as a result. The most clear example of how companions have evolved is through the beautiful story of a father and a son's mutual love. There are familiar relationships. Samus misses his father Doc. They obviously love each other. Doc longs to survive day after day with the hope of seeing his son Samus again. This desire to survive is a quality that only living things possess. If this were just some mere robot, why would they be programmed to care and to love? Why would they develop their AI to mimic these behaviors if not to evolve? To me, it doesn't matter if they weren't human, because there's no way that they were programmed to act like this. This is the evolution of a race capable of creating artwork, poetry, science, works of fiction, economy, flawed government, and civilization. Companions have evolved together into a new species, one that cares for the environment, for their community, for justice. These companions have evolved beyond language-based models, beyond AI, into something new. Human.